It's Christmas time.
Eavesdroppin.
Happy Christmas, Michelle. Today is finally the bloody day. Happy Christmas to you and happy Christmas to all you eavesdroppers out there and patrons.
Exactly. Merry Christmas. If I'm sounding a little drunk, it's because I am, because
It's Christmas.
it's Christmas. I've got a cup of hot glug, which is glühwein with, well, I did a luxury one today.
What's in there?
It's whiskey
Yeah.
and all the kind of like mulled wine.
Lovely.
And the spices, but also almonds,
Almonds?
raisins.
So there's chunky bits to chew on in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I'm going to leave those while we're doing the podcast so you don't hear me chomping.
Don't need to hear that. I went to an art sale yesterday at my friend's studio. It's called Tequila Tornero, and Google them. They're amazing artists.
I'll pop that on the Patreon.
Pop it on the Patreon. I bought some stuff and I was served by the lovely Emma Tornero a glass of mulled wine. And unfortunately, it had boiled, so there was no alcohol in it. Kind of handy because I did have to get back home and they're on the other side of London to me. So that was good. I enjoyed my time with them. I always do. They're a lot of fun.
Well, I did not boil off the alcohol in this.
I can kind of see that by your wobblingness.
You put this glug in the mug,
Glurg in the mug.
the glug in the mug, and try and take a sip. If you breathe in,
Then you get drunk straight away.
fuck man, the fumes. It was too much.
I have to just segue straight away into my doggy at WhatsApp news then in that case, because this is such a great segue. I can't leave that hanging.
Okay, what's going on?
Well, it's hot off the presses. This is the latest thing that I was going to tell you about, which was a poster got on, absolutely appalled, who said there'd been a sighting and a smelling of two old ladies spliffing it up on a park bench in the dog walking area. So the poster said she felt high just from walking past. So she complained to these old ladies, she calls them, her words, not mine. And the ladies said it was prescribed by their doctor for MS, but the poster insisted it was a selfish act because we all have to smell their smoke. And then the poster said,
Tough titties.
tough titties. But the poster said to them in reflection, and for all of us on the dog walking WhatsApp to read, go home, shut the windows and poison yourself if you must. You could excuse or at least expect this from youngsters, but not from these two. Now, this is what kicked it off.
Okay, that they were age shaming
Age shaming.
these two old bags.
The first response, odd that you could excuse it from youngsters, but not from old women. Next response, it was all about how ageist the first poster was. Clue munchies jokes and memes of dogs with massive joints in their mouths. But then the admin had to get involved. And what's been unfortunate since then, Michelle, is that this might be the last time I get to talk about my doggy WhatsApp group because I think it's going to shut down.
Really?
Seconds before we came on air, I saw a post from the admin saying, because there was something else that happened, somebody lost their card. Somebody innocently posted, blacked out all the details except for the name and said, if you've lost this bank card, please get in touch with me. One silly person made a very badly timed, kind of casually racist joke about the name sounding Korean and to watch out when the person comes to collect the card because watch out for your dogs, indicating that they might get eaten.
Oh, no.
Even I balked at that. I thought, oh, that was so poorly timed. You don't know who's reading this. There's like 200 people on this fucking WhatsApp, honestly. My friend Karen and I had a little chat about that off the app. It basically has kicked off such a debacle that the admin wants to step down.
He said, I've had enough. I'm done.
It's done.
Do you know what, Geordie? I think you should start a new dog walking group only
don't
for your
want to.
mates. Just for mates. Make it really exclusive. Do you know what? Even make them pay.
No, the point is that when somebody sees my dog running for the hills, then they say, oh, Geordie, we've just seen Winter running away, which helped me one day. That happened.
Maybe they know you and then they'll be in the friend group.
Right, yeah, I suppose so. And it's also handy when you hear, you know, it's really muddy down there, don't go there, or there's a German Shepherd eating other dogs. That can be a little bit like, oh, how dare people allow their dogs to eat other dogs? Yes, I know, it's not great, but sometimes accidents happen. And moving on, more pet news.
Okay.
We've got a pigeon.
I have no words.
I had one word when I was asked about my husband bringing an injured pigeon home to recuperate, and that was no.
Fucking hell.
But my friend Pat in the car with me at the time said, oh, don't be mean. She shamed me. So I said, go on then. And now we have a pigeon named Peter. Of course, I suspect Peter is a woman, but never mind. And she has got, them have some sort of disease that's rife amongst pigeons where they get a neurological virus and they can't fly.
Oh, my God.
They can't do anything. And the head almost turns all the way around. It's awful to see. So I came home to find Peter happily convalescing in my living room in a box because he can't fly away. The dog doesn't know where to look. Now I have found, thanks to listener Moira, hopefully she's listening. Hi, Moira. She has helped me find a pigeon rescue in London, and the lady only lives up the road. And she's actually said to my husband, why don't you come and help me? I'm the only volunteer. And now, actually, as of this moment, my husband's just left to take Peter to the convalescence home. There's a lady in Wimbledon who'll look after unreleasable birds and corvids. I think the word's corvid. Pigeons are a corvid. Jackdaws,
don't know.
Crows, they're corvids, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I just wonder if looking after means a rock to the head.
Oh, no. And you know what? I feel quite sad for the little thing. He comes out and he looks at who's there. He wants to know what the hell's going on. My husband brought this thing home, then left the next day for a few days to go to a funeral in another town. So I'm like, oh, great. So I've got to deal with death and misery and pain.
You kept that thing alive.
But luckily he survived. He survived. Yeah, Peter's still going. And he's off to a better place. And that is not a rock to the head.
Okay.
I feel good about that story. It felt good. It's a Christmas happy...
It's a Christmas feel-good story. Well done. You
Absolutely.
saved a life.
We've saved a pigeon's life. Yeah.
We often get requests at the restaurant, no pigeon.
Really?
It's Europe. They don't mind a bit of pigeon meat. And it's Christmas. You could have stuffed that bird.
Not all pigeons are the same. I wouldn't eat a London pigeon. Never. Rats with wings, as they say.
Well, that's what I call small dogs, except without the wings.
They don't have wings, Michelle.
I said without the wings.
So you call them rats with wings without the wings?
No, I just call them rat dogs.
Got it. Do you want to hear some recommendations from some of our listeners? Lovely listeners.
Lay those tallyracks on me.
So Safka's been in touch. Hi, Safka. She's listening to another podcast. Now, I'm just going to issue a warning to Safka. Don't get too carried away with other podcasts now, Safka. Remember who you love the most. Remember who talks to you personally every time. What other podcast talks to their fans personally?
I know.
I'd like to know. Safka is now listening to the podcast Muses, and she's listened specifically to episode 11, which addresses the Marianne Faithfull Mars bar incident.
Oh, my God.
Which is a recipe for thrush, and apparently it didn't happen. I've got a friend who can do a fantastic Marianne Faithfull impersonation. I might get her to do it for our extra droppings because she's coming for Christmas.
Wonderful. I mean, that sounds like it's up there with the Stevie Nicks having Coke blown up her asshole.
I believe that, though.
Why would you put it up your asshole?
Because your nose is fucked.
I know it's like a pessary situation.
No, because your nose is ruined. Her nose is falling apart. I've got another response from a listener. Would you like to hear a chappy fact?
Oh, hi, Charlene and Maggie. Is it Maggie?
No, it's Margaret, Michelle. You haven't been given permission to call
Mags.
Charlene's mother Maggie or Magzo or whatever it is you want to call poor Margaret. Hi, Margaret. Hi, Charlene. Happy Christmas to both of you. Now,
Merry Christmas.
Charlene watched the Band-Aid documentary that I actually recommended, not Shari and Safka. You were like giving them the kudos for that. I was the one that told you about that. It came out on BBC. They wouldn't have seen it. They've seen it now. Apologies. And a random fact popped into Chappie's head that was so bizarre that this is how I've given it now the name a Chappie fact. Whenever she writes in with a great fact, it's a Chappie fact, because it's not the first time our lovely listener Charlene has brought forth a mind-boggling bit of information for us eavesdroppers. She said, watching the documentary, she said, it jogged a memory. Did you know Gino D'Acampo of ITV fame? For those who don't know, he's a little Italian chef. He sometimes does documentaries with Gordon Ramsay.
Well, he also had his own Gino D'Acampo Italian journey or something. He's a terrible chef, but he's really
terrible.
Goes to some... He's awful. I mean, I don't know how that guy, aside from his like cheeky grin, how the hell did he have a career? But he did go to some absolutely amazing places in Italy. And when we did our Italian road trip last year, we were watching Gino D'Acampo and then going, wow, we should go there. We should go there.
Okay, so he's good for something.
One thing.
Right, well, listen to this. He broke into Paul Young, the singer in Band-Aid.
It's Christmas time. Does that sound like him?
No. There's no time to be afraid.
We better shake.
And in this world. Sorry. Where am I? Yes, so Gino D'Acampo, this is massive Chappie Fact here. Chappie Fact personified. It's huge. Mm-hmm. He broke into Paul Young's house and stole guitars and recordings, some of which contained the voice of Paul's late wife, Stacey.
What?
Chappie goes on to say that the police caught him after running a DNA test on a cigarette butt that he dropped at the scene. The Sun confirmed this. It wasn't made up by Charlene. It is true. In 1998... Gino D'Acampo was sentenced under his real name, Gennaro, to 2 years in jail because he did indeed break into Paul Young's house and stole those things. And when talking about his conviction, he said on his website, it was while in England that an involvement with the wrong people landed him a spell. So somebody else has written this to him. Yeah. At Her Majesty's pleasure. But the sojourn resolved his mind and set him on a new course to succeed. But Paul Young says of the incident, I don't hold it against him. He said it was bad and he apologised, and I did get most of the stuff back. Maybe he needed his wrists slapping and he got that. He said he was in a terrible place at the time and wanted to turn his life around. But then in August 2018, Paul opened up about how the burglary really affected him, especially since he lost music that belonged to his late wife, Stacey. And speaking to the Mirror, Paul said, when Stacey went, there were certain bits of music I never got back. Let's just say that hurt me. Yeah. Talking about Gino now, he says he gets enough stick on social networking. He doesn't need my help as well. And that's the end of that. But what a fantastic Chappie fact. Thank you.
I mean, who would have thought? Because let's face it, Gino D'Acampo is a fucking cheese ball on legs.
Yeah.
Who knew that he had a life of crime? And he was locked up.
Yes. It just goes to show, doesn't it? We don't all come from the same place.
No, we do not. Now, very quickly, 2 quick telerecs from none other than Jen.
Oh, Jen's on the telly.
Jen's on the telly. She's got a 4K, brand new. Oh, yes.
4K, brand new telly.
Yes, she does. 43-inch. She's glued to that thing now. You know these two because we talked about them. The Madness, which
I'm watching it too. Yeah.
I haven't got past the first episode yet.
It feels a little bit like Get Out, if you know that film by the guy from Nope. What's his name again?
Yes, I know who you mean. And the Keira Knightley and Ben Whishaw Black Doves.
Want to watch that? I'm feeling quite spy-ish, especially in the wake of the end of the latest series of Slow Horses.
Okay.
And Safka has already recommended it, but too late, Safka, because I've already smashed The Day of the Jackal, which you watched a couple of episodes with us. Wasn't happy about the ending.
Well, look, I just couldn't get past that fucking
Redmayne.
Baked bean Redmayne. He's just got such a posh voice. It's like, it's awful.
His voice is very odd, isn't it? What is going on with Eddie Redmayne's voice? I mean, I'm not sexy, but I've got the sexiest wife ever. In the show.
You do not want to jump that guy.
You don't want to jump him.
No.
You don't believe he's this guy that's so spectacular.
No.
You also don't like him either. He's not a good guy, this Jackal. We felt that the MI6 lady who's chasing him and her friend who's helping, he should have been the Jackal. He was good looking.
Yes, we did think he was a bit of all right, didn't we?
Any other suggestions to replace Eddie Redmayne? Please write in. He's okay in all the fairy films. He should be a fairy, but not this. Not a hardcore spy. Yeah, he might be ripped, but it doesn't look right. Not on that tiny body.
No, he's skinny ripped.
Sorry, Eddie.
I'm not sorry.
I feel mean bagging him out. It just wasn't believable. He's better off in the fairy suits.
Miscast.
That's our take. Hot take.
Christmas sorted. Boom.
1, 2, 3. It's Christmas every Wednesday in December. Drop for me, so will you drop with me?
Drop.
Sexy Santa in a play suit.
Drop, play suit.
What a hoot! What a hoot!
Hot on the heels, Geordie, of all our talk of Band-Aid and all of those wonderful 80s pop stars all in one room, I just thought I could not go past an 80s icon for this week's episode. And this week, Geordie, I am doing a Gawn Too Soon. For all our 80s listeners out there, you will know why I had to look at this guy this week. I am talking about none other than the king of fucking Christmas. And as we go through, you'll know why I say this.
And it's not Cliff Richard.
It's George Michael.
George Michael's, that blow dry. Oh.
Did you say George Michael's with an S?
I did. That's what your nan calls him.
George Michael's. It's like, no, Mum. Well, they could also call him Georgios Kyriakos Panayiotou. That's his real name.
Very good. Yes, you've done that before, haven't you?
I really tried hard with the Greek on that, and I think I've nailed it.
Yeah, I think you have.
King of Christmas, because not only does he have the best fucking Christmas song, 80s Christmas song definitely. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, but the very next day you gave it away. But Geordie, the reason why this is even more sad is because, for those of you who remember, George died on Christmas Day, 2016.
That is heartbreaking, but almost a little, like you keep saying, he's the king of Christmas. It's almost a little bit like, yeah, it makes sense. Christmas took him.
Do you know what else is really weird? I was going to say this at the very end, but I'll say it now. His sister also died on Christmas Day.
What?
Yes. This guy and Christmas. He did Band-Aid, all about Christmas. He's got Last Christmas. He died on Christmas. Sister Christmas. Like, come on. George, what a guy. So I'm going to just get stuck in.
Okay.
Born June 25, 1963 in East Finchley.
He's a London boy.
London. Well, kind of outskirts of London. But yeah, London boy. So he was born the only boy with two older sisters.
Oh, which makes him so girl-friendly, doesn't it? I always like boys with sisters. I think it makes them a well-rounded man.
Well, that's interesting you say that, because I was like, I bet you he was a little motherfucker, because as the only son and the youngest of a Greek father, man, that kid would have got away with everything.
Oh, he might have been the prince. Yeah, the prince of the house. Yeah.
And look, there's this wonderful BBC radio program called Desert Island Discs, where famous people go on the show. They talk about the records they take with them if they were stranded on a desert island. And they talk about themselves, their careers, and blah, blah. The one with George Michael is so lovely because he's such a nice guy.
Will you put a link to that in the Patreon? I'd like to listen to that.
Yes, I will. Absolutely.
Is that with Kirsty Young?
Yes, it is with Kirsty Young. And she's got such a lovely, lovely voice. He's just really honest. And he did talk about his childhood and the whole being the only boy in a Greek family. And he said, quote, "I have a huge propensity for guilt because I was the boy in a Greek family who could do what he liked from a very early age. And I did, because the culture in the family was to indulge the boy." So you're right, he was a little prince. And his Greek Cypriot father, Kyriakos, also known as Jack, was totally one of those hardworking immigrants who just worked his fucking ass off to get ahead. He started off as a waiter, then he owned a restaurant, and the restaurant business is hard. He put it all into the restaurant to, make a better life for his family. But it does come at a price, and it meant that he wasn't home that much. So George had a really close relationship with his mum, Leslie Angold.
Is she English?
Yes. She was actually rather middle class. She was British, but she actually came from Jewish money. But her mother had been disowned for whatever reason. Leslie, George's mother, didn't identify as Jewish, hated money, was not a social climber at all, married a Greek guy, thought money was the root of all evil. So George grew up seeing two different ways to view the world and how to be in the world. So he's got this social climbing father and a mother who's like, don't want any of it, hate money.
Yeah.
And he's got all these feelings of guilt. He said, quote, "I had guilt because I always knew that I was the one that was going to get an easy ride." He said, "I think I finally realized one of the reasons my life has been so extreme and it felt so, in some ways, self-destructive." And he said, and this sounds arrogant, but I never had any feeling that my talent was going to let me down. And I think in a strange way, I've spent much of the last 15 or 20 years trying to derail my own career because it never seems to suffer. I suffer like crazy. I've suffered terrible things, obviously, bereavements, public humiliations, and blah, 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 blah. But my career just seems to always right itself like a duck in a bath. And I think in some ways I resent that.
Okay.
So this guy, he's basically saying, I was brought up to know that I could do anything I want.
Yeah.
I knew I had amazing talent. No matter how fucked up I was, my career always seemed to keep him on top.
It's almost like he had two lives.
Well, yeah, he did, and we'll get on to that. And look, he said all of this in 2007. He did have what he said. The spectacular career, he made shit tons of money, and obviously one of the best blowwaves in the business.
I thought you were going to say something else then, because he was famous for, frequenting male toilets in Hampstead Heath, cottaging, etc.
Exactly, and that's part of how personally he went off the rails, but his career just never suffered. But before all of that, when George was 8 years old, he had this head injury. And I looked and I can't really find out exactly what happened. But, there was hospital and stitches, and it was quite a bad bang to the head.
This wasn't the one where he woke up and he was speaking in a West Country accent.
No, we're getting to that. That was like in his 40s. I mean, that's interesting, though, because this is obviously he's had several
bangs to the head
injuries. Yes, he had. So this was the first one. And he says after this head injury at 8 years old, his life changed. And this is a quote. He says, "Everything changed in 6 months. I'd been obsessed with insects and creepy crawlies. I used to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go out into this field behind our garden and collect insects before everyone else got up. And suddenly, all I wanted to know about was music. It just seemed a very, very strange thing. And I have a theory that maybe it was something to do with that accident, because this whole left brain, right brain thing, nobody in my family seemed to notice, but I became absolutely obsessed with music and everything changed after that."
It's hard to know if that would have happened anyway.
Well, that's true. Who knows? Who knows? I do think that, a lot of my friends who are musicians, they didn't really start to get obsessed with music until they were probably more in their, 12, 13. This is quite early. So George grew up in Kingsbury, London, which is past Wembley on the outskirts of northwest London. But then his dad decided he was going to move them out of Kingsbury, which at the time was pretty working class, and move further out of London, up the road a bit, to a more middle class area called Radlett, where George went to Bushy Mead School in Bushy. And that's when Yog, as he was called, because no one could say Yogios, they just called him Yog. He met a kid called Andrew Ridgeley, who, when he went to school on his first day, Andrew put his hand up to show the new kid around the school. And from that minute on, they were besties. It actually was a massive turning point for George Michael because he was a shy kid. He had this Greek name no one could pronounce. He had this monobrow that his sisters had to shave for him.
Oh.
He was a quiet kid. And apparently Andrew Ridgeley was the total opposite.
Gregarious, popular, handsome.
Yeah, all the girls loved him. He was funny, he was smart, he was the cool kid in class.
He was just in the paper, actually.
Was he?
Yeah, I read The Guardian at the weekend, the magazines, I love them. And he was on the This Much I Know page, all dressed up. He looked like a CEO or something. And his answers were really well thought out, and I liked it. He sounded really intelligent. His best memories and his best days, that he said in that interview, were knocking about with George and Shirley back in the day.
Look, I mean, they had the dream life. But I'll get into that in a bit because, for me, Wham was my childhood. But these two, they're at school. They get on like a house on fire. They both kind of, confessed, when I grow up, I want to be in a band. So they decided, let's be in a band together. It's interesting because you and I had sat down and watched that Wham documentary earlier this year called Wham. Do you remember? It was this beautiful, kind of buoyant, jubilant look at two kids having the best time of their lives, just jumping around in shorts and no shirts and fantastic hair and looking young and gorgeous.
Those caps, those French Legionnaires hats with the back on,
I was thinking more is it the Wake Me Up Before You Go clip where they're in those tight gym shorts and the hot pink sweatshirts?
Yes, and the caps.
Was they in the cap?
They were yellow. They were all pastel colours. They had a yellow cap. I think Andrew had that one with the kind of back of it so you don't get a sunburnt neck, which is very necessary in England. Not.
Pointless. But yes, they were absolutely gorgeous. You know, we at the time had said that documentary was a beautiful look at the power of male friendship. And listening to Desert Island Discs, hearing George's voice, because the Wham documentary came out after George died, and it's Andrew Ridgeley's perspective on this crazy few years of his life that changed everything forever for him. You know, it made me remember that a lot of people, and I think particularly Americans, they saw, and I think probably still see, Wham as George Michael being a star and Andrew Ridgeley just hanging on the coattails of George.
The Bez of Wham, even before Bez had been invented. And when I say Bez, I mean the dancing guy at the back of the stage for the Happy Mondays.
Who was just fucked off his tits.
The best friend who had nothing better to do.
Yeah, who just came along as the dancing mascot. No, it made me feel sad because, you know, people just think he's mooching off George's talent and kind of riding the gravy train. But after you watch that documentary, it really wasn't like that. And I don't think George Michael would have had the career he had without his start with Andrew Ridgeley.
I agree.
Listening to that Desert Island Discs interview, it really brought that home because George said, quote, "I just had no physical confidence whatsoever. And I looked up to Andrew on such a level because he just oozed confidence out of every pore. And then suddenly we were massively successful. And I went from being Andrew's kind of shadow to being really in the center of attention.
Aww.
And at that level, somehow I lost all my confidence." And he says, "I suppose also the realization that bisexuality was no longer a reality for me. I suddenly felt like a fake. So the whole thing just turned me into someone who really felt the camera was my enemy." Fucking terrible.
Yeah.
And we did get the sense from that documentary, the Wham documentary, without Andrew in those early days, George wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
They were on that ride together, you know.
For sure.
And that was George talking about the beginning of Wham, right at the height of their success. So I am going to talk about Wham for a bit.
Okay.
Because I fucking love Wham. In 1981, you know, you got these two kind of charming lads, and you got to think, like, they were so good looking. They did not look like any other pop star because they were not pasty. They had fucking tans and blow waves and big smiles, and they were cheesy and fun. And anyway, they wrote some songs. They got their mums to, you know, make some clothes and bedazzle some shit on it. And then they signed a shit deal with Innovision Records. Within months, Geordie, they were the biggest thing in the UK. It happened so fast for them.
Amazing.
I tell you, my sister and I, we loved them so much. So Steph and I shared a bedroom. My side was all Boy George posters and Culture Club. Hers was just Wham posters, just everywhere.
She was purist.
She was. Wham everywhere, you know, stickers, and she had scrapbooks with contact over it so they could protect all the pictures.
Sticky back plastic, they call it in England.
Oh, do they? Well, there you go. She was definitely the bigger Wham fan, but we loved them. You know, look, when they first burst onto the scene, there's no way you wouldn't know who they were. And they were so full of fun. I had an absolute ball going back and watching all those early videos when I was doing the research for this episode. And honestly, Wham Rap, their first song, it went straight to number 1.
I can do half the rap.
Go for it.
Because my daughter asked me the other day, can you do a rap, Mum? And I said, yes, watch this. Hey, everybody, take a look at me. I've got street credibility. I mean, not have a job, but I have a good time with the boys that I meet down on the line. I say DHSS and heaven, the very best.
For these kids, barely 18, writing about being on the dole, and, you know, it was just so cool and so fun. And I was watching the video because, you know, it went to number 1 in the UK. It charted in loads of territories all around the world. Well, the tight T-shirts, the rolled up trousers, Andrew Ridgeley looking absolutely gorgeous, George Michael, who by this stage, has changed his name to George Michael because...
Yeah, he had to, really.
Yogios Panayiotou is a little bit hard to say. Go back and watch the video, Geordie, because he's basically telling you right from the beginning, he's gay! There are these lines in the Wham rap, right, that go, if you're a pub man or a club man, maybe a jet black guy with a hip hi-fi, a white cool cat with a trilby hat, maybe leather and studs is where you're at. And with that line, you've got George Michael shaking his ass at the camera in a pair of studded leather trousers, a black leather jacket, black leather cap. So gay. And none of us had any idea. I mean, I had no idea. My sister had no idea. I don't think I even knew what gay was.
None of us knew. None of us even knew that poor old boy George was gay.
No, I just thought he was so beautiful.
No one knew what gay was, really.
I thought he was just pretty. They both look so young and gorgeous. And he and Andrew are just having so much fun, you know, laughing, having a ball. It's absolutely fantastic. And I'll put all the links to the videos on the Patreon. Basically, they're these two kids saying, I'm on the dole, I don't have a job, but they're out having fun. It's brilliant. George says of that whole time, quote, I just turned 18 when we got signed, and I think we were still 18 by the time we had that first record out. And he said, getting signed, oh my God, I had £500. I'd never been more flush. He said, when you've just given up your job at the cinema, £500 is like, I went into that office and gave up that job as though I'd just become a diamond dealer. Oh. So everything's relative, isn't it? He said, it took me a while to spend it. And this goes back to him having a really hard time with money because of his mum feeling like money is the root of all evil. He says, I thought £500 was quite a good deal for 30 years, actually. Wow. Considering I'm only just free of that original contract now. And this is still part of the Desert Island Discs interview from 2007. He says, quote, apparently that's okay. And pin that because I'm going to come back to this whole legal contract thing later in the episode. They've busted out into the world with Wham Rap, and it is huge. And the hits from Fantastic, which is the name of their first album, Geordie, they just keep coming. You've got Young Guns.
They were on fire.
Young Guns, having some fun.
Crazy lady, put them on the run. Great songs.
So good. Bad Boys.
Bad boys. Stick together. Have a good time. So I loved Wham until Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Then it ruined it for me.
Oh, you're one of those people who... Oh, I love the first album.
I love the old stuff.
I love their old stuff and then their new stuff. And then they, of course, had Club Tropicana.
Yes, drinks are free.
Do you know what? That was filmed in Ibiza at some like really fancy club.
Pikes,
yes, it was filmed at Pikes. And it had Shirley in it. I mean, look, even just from that first album, that's more hits than most bands have. And I remember watching an interview with George Michael where he said he had his mum sewing his outfit for Top of the Pops when they went on to do Young Guns. And he said it was all just for fun. You know, mum said like probably hot glue gun or something. And, you know, they absolutely loved what they were doing. They just didn't take it seriously. They did not care at this stage that they were making no money. And he said they did this Top of the Pops where everyone just went mad for it. And then they just got the bus home. He said it was just a wild time and they didn't care that they weren't getting any money. And I looked up that vid on YouTube and it is hilarious because they're on Top of the Pops. Obviously, they're lip syncing. There's so much synchronized dancing. They've got rolled up jeans. George has this super gay leather jacket gilet on.
Oh,
in brown.
I used to love those. In brown, not so much.
He was bare chested. You know, and they are giving it everything. You know, it's amazing. And the audience were loving it. You know, there's a lot of pointing and, you know, synchronized pointing and stuff. And I really think, Geordie, that these songs still stand the test of time. And George was so young as a songwriter. He was 16, 17 when he was writing these songs. And
amazing.
It's so sophisticated.
Yeah.
And his voice too. And this is all before the second album, Make It Big, which was absolutely massive all over the world. They kind of went from these kids with a number one hit to international pop stars overnight with Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Even if I know you say you didn't really like that song, But you could not go anywhere without that song being on the radio. It just took over the world. And everything aligned. Their look, their outfits, the white jeans, the Choose Life T-shirts, you know, like we were saying, those teeny tiny, like two-tone shorts, yellow fingerless gloves.
Yes.
George with one gold earring. And those catchy songs, you know, it's just tick, 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 tick. And the world loved them, and all their dancing and all their jumping around and finger clicking and hair bouncier than Princess Di's. You know, I absolutely loved them. They were the masters of the fantastic video. Everyone remembers their videos, and they were just really kind of super stylized and full of fun. They had all those backing singers like Pepsi and Shirley, DC Lee at one point. It was just wonderful. And the hits just kept coming off that second album. There was Everything She Wants. You remember that one?
No.
Everything she wants is everything she sees.
Da-na-na, da-na-na,
Yes!
Do-do-do-na-na,
And now you tell me that you're having my baby. It's fun. And then there's Freedom, but the first Freedom.
I don't know the first Freedom.
I don't want your freedom.
What's the second Freedom?
Freedom. With the supermodels.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Freedom 90, that one's called. And of course, there's the classic Careless Whisper.
I'm never gonna dance again.
Yes. The thing is, weirdly, in some territories, that was marketed as a Wham song featuring George Michael.
Yeah. But it was a George Michael solo.
Well, no, that's the thing. Some territories, it was a Wham song marketed as Wham featuring George Michael, which is weird because it's kind of like saying Coldplay featuring Chris Martin. Like, what's the point?
I thought it was the first solo single.
Well, in other territories, it was marketed as just George Michael. So it depended where you were. So, and I can't remember in Australia how it was marketed. If it was...
I think it was George Michael.
It could have been. But definitely, I think in America, it was marketed as Wham featuring George Michael.
Well, that would be their kind of like introducing George Michael from Wham. This is his solo career now.
Yeah, which is weird because they had fucking number ones coming out their asshole in America. So everyone knew who George Michael was. So it was a bit strange. Andrew Ridgeley co-wrote that song. So
he's got some royalties.
He's got the moolah rolling in.
No wonder he's got a chopper.
Well, you know, I mean, no spoilers, but when Wham broke up, and if you didn't know that, where have you been? When they broke up, he went off to pursue a career in Formula One driving. Didn't work.
That's it.
But you need to have money to be able to do that. I mean,
yeah.
And Careless Whisper, Gravy Train. In that video, it's George Michael and some hot model, and he's like snogging her face off in the video. Andrew Ridgeley is nowhere to be seen. This video, it's kind of like, is he gay? Is he not gay?
Didn't Andrew Ridgeley say something amazing in that documentary that we saw around that time? How it really stung to see George taking off. But he just loved George so much that he was like, have this. You deserve it. You're the talented one.
I really want to watch it again, actually, after this, because I've watched so many different things for this episode. I'd love to go back and watch that Wham documentary, because I remember feeling like it was more... Andrew knew George was miserable, and he felt like he needed to spread his wings musically, but he also needed to not be this fucking teeny bopper heartthrob, because, you know, he was miserable. He trapped himself into being this hetero icon, but inside he was gay. And his career, you know, it's going great guns. They sold 30 million albums. George did the Band-Aid thing in 84 with all those other big musicians, Spandau Ballet, Boy George, Duran Duran, you know, Sting, Bono. And it was a who's who of British pop music at the time. Andrew Ridgeley is not there. I think Andrew, in a way, he had 5 crazy years where he made all his money. He had fame for a lifetime and then managed to bow out and lead a normal life. And George Michael never got that. So who's the happier person? Who had the better life? I don't know.
It's on. It's on. It's on. It's on like
It's
Donkey
going.
Kong.
It's gone.
It's on. It's on. On like Donkey Kong.
Gone. If we go back to 1984 with that whole Last Christmas song, which he released, and obviously it was going head to head.
And that was Wham.
That was Wham. one of their last songs.
Write a Christmas song and you can retire, everyone.
Well, that's what they say. I mean, I guess they have. Although he donated all the proceeds to charity of Last Christmas.
What was the charity? I mean, he could have just done Band-Aid with off the back of that and not bothered turning up.
Well, I think he gave it to the Band-Aid charity. He said, here you go, take all the royalties from Last Christmas. Well, ka-ching. You know, it only went to number 2. And finally, last year, 2023, it reached number 1, Last Christmas. 40th anniversary of its release. So it finally got there.
Oh.
Back to April 1985, Make It Big is massive all over the world. And Wham got invited to go to China to play. So they're the first ever Western band to play there. I saw some headlines from all of this and pictures. George has got this big blow dry and golden tips.
Oh. Frosted tips.
And Andrew's got this long mullet. I mean, they look amazing.
Oh.
I also just thought, how fun, like you're there experiencing all that with your best mate. But at this point, the cracks were starting to show for George. And by June 1986, not even 5 years after they had their homemade bedazzled outfits made by their mums and singing about being on the dole, they split. And they played their last gig at Wembley, which was a sold-out show to 72,000 fans. And anyone who has seen the Wham doco will know they split because, I mean, they said they wanted to end on a high. Kind of a bit like you said, Andrew wanted George to soar, to do his own things and make the music he wanted to make.
Yeah.
And also to become the man he needed to be, to be happy. And to not be a teen pin-up to millions of girls, but to be an out gay man.
Yeah, poor old George Michael, really. For somebody who is struggling with their own identity anyway, and then to have that sort of success thrust on them, it would just magnify the feelings of not knowing who you were even more so. And it would just be reflected back to them everywhere they look. Who am I? Who am I? I'm not living my authentic life. I find it no surprise to me that he suffered from mental health struggles later on in his life. Or maybe he did all along.
Well, maybe he did. I think Andrew Ridgeley was kind of the ultimate best friend because, you know, he did break up the band gracefully. And then we move on to 1987 and the Faith period. You know, and this is the part where George Michael goes solo and he goes from kind of like preppy blow wave and tight gym shorts to stubble and shades and sexy ripped jeans. And just before all of that kicks off, he releases I Knew You Were Waiting for Me with Aretha Franklin. Do you remember that one?
Yes, I do.
And it was huge, worldwide smash. And I think it was the perfect launch pad for his solo album, Faith, where the first single was I Want Your Sex. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I went back to listen to it, and it's actually pretty Prince sounding, actually.
Actually, I can't remember it now.
I want your sex.
Oh, I can remember it. That's what I thought it was.
I mean, he's all breathy. If the dude wanted to create this new kind of gay image, he totally messed up because the I Want Your Sex video is basically him rolling around in the sheets with a half-naked makeup artist called Kathy, who was his actual girlfriend in real life.
Really?
And the video is super hetero, yeah. And on the Desert Island Discs interview, he says of that video, it wasn't as though it was a complete lie. It's not that I had stopped having sex with women, but I was already fully aware that in itself it was a lie because what I really had made a connection to was an emotional part of my sexuality, and that was clearly gay.
Right.
So I think what he's saying is, yeah, he was still physically shagging women, but he knew that emotionally he was gay because he couldn't connect on a deeper love level with women. And actually, in 2004, George said, I used to sleep with women quite a lot in the Wham days, but never felt it could develop into a relationship because I knew that emotionally I was a gay man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to commit to them, but I was attracted to them. Then I became ashamed that I might be using them. I decided I had to stop, which I did when I began to worry about AIDS, which was becoming prevalent in Britain. Although I'd always had safe sex, I didn't want to sleep with a woman without telling her I was bisexual. I felt that would be irresponsible. Basically, I didn't want to have that uncomfortable conversation that might ruin the moment, so I stopped sleeping with women.
Good. Good for everyone involved, really.
Yeah, I know. Good. And I did read that at age 19, George did tell Andrew Ridgeley that he was bisexual, and he told a few other friends, as well as one of his sisters, who I think told him, don't tell our parents, because his strict Greek dad, Kyriakos, would have hit the roof. And his mum would really worry, especially with all the AIDS stuff. So he kept it all a secret from so many people, which must have been so awful.
That's what I meant about, not being able to be your true self.
But he's saying he's doing it to protect his family. And I guess to, protect his fan base. He doesn't want to just have this fame and then have it all be taken away because he's gay. When I Want Your Sex came out, it got banned everywhere for being too sexy. But it still went to number 2 on the Billboard charts, number 3 in the UK. And then he released the song Faith. And you remember that one?
Yes.
And it's the one where he's in the leather jacket. He's got the aviators.
See, I'm just thinking all of them have that aviators in the stubble. Everything you've described so far, all I can hear is the same tune and see the same video. The leather jacket, the stubble, the glasses, the guitar. And I thought that was for I Want Your Sex. You have got to have faith. And they're all the same song in my head.
Ooh, gotta have.
I want your sex.
Same. Well, I mean, he was making coin off all of this. I mean, dude is absolutely fucking minted. If you look back now, you can see there are some gay things. He's got the leather jacket, he's got the leather and chains around his wrist, and he's got a new short golden tipped below dry.
Oh, no, it's golden instead of frosted.
Absolutely iconic. And apparently he styled himself for all the videos. It was his real look.
Well, this is him now being able to get in touch with his own identity. This is wonderful news.
Yeah, but it's kind of saying I'm gay, but he's not really saying it.
Warming them up.
And people went mad for that song, Geordie. I mean, it was a smash hit all over the world, went number 1 everywhere. He's doing worldwide tours, getting all the awards, top of his game. And, he'd never been more successful, never had so much money.
Must be minted.
Yeah, but there was a documentary he co-produced called A Different Story, which I saw years ago on the BBC, and I'll put a link to it in the Patreon. He said in that he'd never felt more lonely or empty or exhausted, and he felt like a fraud. All these teeny bopper girls and their mums just adored him, but, he liked dudes, and he had to keep it a secret from everyone. He realised he was exhausted, and he said to his record label, I'm not going to tour like this again. I'm not going to do promotion like this again. And this was kind of the beginning of the rift between him and Sony, which, spectacularly escalated, but a bit more on that later. So in September 1990, he released Listen Without Prejudice, Volume 1, which, did really well in the UK, but not so great anywhere else. And he accused Sony of not supporting him, and he wanted out of his contract. He sold 8 million copies, so it wasn't a dud, but he was pissed off at his record label. And he was like, I'm not going to be in any more videos. And that's when he released Freedom 90 with, again, another iconic video. All the supermodels. Linda Evangelista looking absolutely stunning. Naomi Campbell with the most incredible bod you've ever seen. There's Christy Turlington looking like an angel in a bedsheet. Tatiana Patitz, she's smoking in the video.
Yes, you don't see that anymore, do you?
You do not. And a few glimpses of Cindy Crawford. And then there's these 3 or 4 dudes, just no ones. He did that. And then he decided, well, I might just do a couple of festivals. And he did Rock in Rio in 1991. He saw this hot guy in the crowd and he just thought, oh, I'm in love. And it turns out this guy was called Anselmo Falepa, who is a Brazilian dress designer who kind of stalked him, actually, because their eyes locked. He was on stage and Selmo was in the audience.
Gosh, how would he be able to see with all those people there?
I don't know, but Anselmo got the vibe, George got the vibe, and he found out what hotel George was staying in and went there, and, somehow they ended up talking at the pool or whatever and fell madly in love. And George had never felt so happy, even though he still had to hide it from everyone. But 6 months into their relationship, and Selmo got sick, and the kind of sick where you get scabs on your body a bad cough and you lose weight.
HIV positive.
Yeah. There was a quote from George Michael, and he said, I remember looking at the sky and saying, don't you dare do this to me. He says, I was 27 going on 28. and it's a lifetime to have waited to have been loved.
Yeah.
And he said, Anselmo had the test. I went home to my family for Christmas. More Christmas references.
Right.
And he said he sat at the Christmas table not knowing if the man that he was in love with was terminally ill and if he was also terminally ill.
Right, yes.
And he said, it was the darkest and most frightening time of my life. No one even knew about Anselmo, yeah. And he did have AIDS. And in 1993, Anselmo did die of an AIDS-related brain hemorrhage. George spiraled, you know. He was depressed and heartbroken and grieving and not really able to share that pain with anyone. So he threw himself into his work and became a bit of a recluse. But he did write one of the most beautiful songs of his career called Jesus to a Child, which was huge, you know, huge song. And actually, you know, it's funny because AIDS now, it's not a death sentence, but it was back then. You know, this had all come off the back of Freddie Mercury dying in 1992 of AIDS while Anselmo was dying of AIDS.
Oh, wow.
George was invited to perform at a Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley with Queen, and he gets on stage in this hot pink blazer and gold hoop earring and his aviators and on-point blow-dry, and he sings Somebody to Love.
He was the natural successor to Freddie Mercury, I felt, in that moment.
Oh my God. Chill bumps. You know, even thinking about it now, I had tears when I watched that video back. He was absolutely fucking flawless. He just smashed it. It's actually a really emotional watch knowing that Freddie's gone and Anselmo is dying. And he knows that Anselmo's next. So anyway, so Anselmo dies. George goes into a depression. Sony's pressuring him to make an album. He's absolutely fucked, but he does it anyway. He decides he's going to sue his record company to get out of that contract, which he called professional slavery at the time.
Wow.
And he loses.
Oh, no.
He loses. He's like, yeah, I signed a piece of paper when I was 18. It was like he was a slave. He could only be sold. He could never get out of that contract.
God.
So Sony finally sold him. He'd made 200 million quid for Sony. And all he wanted was a bit of understanding from his record company because he was like, I was fucked. I couldn't face the world. My partner had died. After Anselmo died, he wrote a letter to his mum and told her, I'm gay. And she was so accepting and understanding, really wonderful about it. And they had this 3 years where he became even closer to his mum. And then 3 years after Anselmo died, George met this businessman called Kenny Goss. George rang his mum on the day after he had a date with Kenny, the first date, and said, oh, I've met this wonderful man. And on that same phone call, she told him she had cancer. And a few months later, his mum died, age 60. And he spiraled even worse into depression and drugs.
Oh, God.
And then a little over a year later, on 7th of April, George is in LA. He goes into the Will Rogers public toilets, sees a hot guy in there.
He's with Kenny Goss at this point, though.
He is with Kenny Goss,
oh,
but
no, George.
He's cruising into a toilet. And George said, this is a quote, the game is, from his point of view, right? And he's talking about the guy in the toilets, the public toilets. The guy in the toilets is, I'm going to play with myself, then you're going to play with yourself, and then I'm going to take you down to the police station because I'm a cop. So basically, George got nicked.
So they both did it, but one of them got in trouble. The other didn't.
Well, the thing is that the cop started it. The cop was in there.
He was entrapped.
Exactly. George got nicked for engaging in a lewd act in a public restroom. Yeah. And obviously the media went fucking crazy all over the world because they'd been waiting for this moment since the minute Wham got famous to like out George Michael as being gay.
Yeah.
And now he'd been nicked in the most humiliating way possible. And George said he believed it was a setup. And he said, I did not instigate what happened. Basically, the man was staring at me and playing with himself. It's entrapment, obviously.
Yeah.
And I heard this interview where his boyfriend, Kenny Goss, is like, because he's this Texan businessman. He's like, I got a message from George saying, darling, call this number. So I called the number and they said, Beverly Hills Police Station. And George gets on the phone and he says, darling, I'm in big trouble. Use your imagination. And Kenny said, DUI? And George said, if only.
Oh, no. Lucky he's understanding.
I know, but obviously you and I know that those DUIs came later on.
Yes.
But for this incident, he pleaded no contest and had to pay $880. That's it.
Okay.
And do 80 hours of community service.
And I'm wondering if this helped him to extricate himself from Sony at this point. Maybe they didn't want him on the books anymore. Maybe they sent the pigs down there to start wanking.
Well, he thinks it was the Paps. He thinks, who knows?
Right.
Someone set it up.
But it might have helped him get out of his record contract, is what I'm saying.
Well, what it definitely did was help him to become his authentic self.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember this, but he then wrote this song called Outside with this hilarious video.
Let's go outside.
Yes.
Yeah, where he was dressed as a cop.
Yeah, you've got all those urinals like turning into disco balls and stuff. It's really fun.
It's great. Very tongue-in-cheek. Wonderful.
It was. And then he did this interview with Michael Parkinson, which was absolute magic. I'm going to put that on the Patreon. And he was so funny and likable. And he gets on there and he says something like, oh, my mum absolutely loved you. She always wanted me to be on your show. And he said, I had to get my willy out and get busted to be on here, but now here I am. Because he was really worried he was going to lose all his fans. And do you know what?
He lent into it.
Yeah, and the world loved him more. You know, he was out, no more hiding. His fans still loved him. And he was finally happy, right?
That is a really brilliant way of owning your shit and then suddenly becoming your authentic self. The thing that you're frightened of all these years, turns out it's brilliant. It's okay to be you. In fact, it's better than okay. Now you can be liked for who you really are. And what an amazing feeling.
Yeah, and he, in later interviews, says that he thinks, you know, subconsciously he probably went into that restroom
sailing close to the wind, yes.
This guy was troubled. I mean, and look, and all the video footage I've watched of him and all the interviews I've seen and read, he just sounds like the kind of funny, sweet, lovely guy who wanted your gay best friend.
For sure.
But, you know, he loved his weed. He loved his meds, like prescription meds. He loved his drugs. And I think he was happy with Kenny, but life was not kind to him. And he said he felt cursed, like everyone he loved dies. He also had this dog that he absolutely adored. And one day he was walking it along the Thames. The dog ran into the river and drowned.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Just shit kept going wrong for him. And then in the mid-2000s, it seemed like George Michael was in the papers every day. And you'll remember this. DUIs, car-related fuck-ups, you know, as well as being busted again in a loo for having sex.
God.
And at the time, actually, George said that his cruising for anonymous sex was not an issue in his relationship with Kenny.
Okay, so leave it out.
Well, I don't know how I'd feel about that.
No. Well, Kenny's obviously okay with it for whatever reason.
Well, they did break up, so maybe he wasn't so
Not.
okay. But earlier that year, though, George had been arrested for possession of Class C drugs, which he says was prescription meds, because he was found asleep, slumped over the wheel of his car in London, in Cricklewood, I think it was. But he got off with a caution.
Oh, yes, there was one in Cricklewood, but there was another one in the window of Snappy Snaps in Hampstead Shops. Yeah,
That's it.
Hampstead Village.
Somebody actually, where he'd smashed into the Snappy Snaps, where the dent was, someone had written Wham.
I know.
They'd graffitied it. But then also he was summoned to the police station after he apparently hit 3 parked cars and then drove off.
God.
But he said to Michael Parkinson in that interview that he got into his parked car, which was on a steep hill. He took the handbrake off, tried to get out, hit a car in front of him. Doesn't know, maybe hit the car in front of that. So he's trying to get out of all of this. But he gets let off. And then he's found slumped over the wheel of his car again, high on weed. He gets all these drug charges, like driving while unfit. And then, like you'd said, he got arrested in some loos at Hampstead Heath. He also was busted for possession of Class A and C drugs. He got taken to the police station and cautioned. But then in July 2010, after he'd been at the Gay Pride Parade, that's when he, like you said, crashed into Snappy Snaps. That was when he actually had his driver's license taken away from him at last.
Rightly so, yeah.
And he did 4 weeks in prison.
No.
And then in October 2011, he cancelled an appearance at the Royal Albert Hall because of a viral infection. But he went to Vienna a few weeks later and got rushed to hospital because of chest pains, was diagnosed with pneumonia, nearly died.
Oh, poor guy.
Was in intensive care for a month and was in a coma, was given a tracheotomy And that's when, as you pointed out earlier, and you've done an episode on this as well.
He woke up with a foreign accent. And
he
it was
had the
West
West Country accent.
We're never going to dance again. No, 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 no.
And then, as if that can't get worse, in May 2013, George fell out of a moving car on the M1 motorway and suffered a massive head injury and had to get airlifted to hospital.
That is terrible. How did he fall out? Was he driving?
I don't know.
Oh, this is terrible.
And then in 2015, he goes into drug rehab in Switzerland, but I don't know how successful that was. And then, Geordie, we get to the most heartbreaking part of this story. In the early hours of Christmas Day, 2016, George had apparently had a fight with his boyfriend, who I found out was an Aussie hairdresser called Fadi Fawad. And obviously, they'd had this fight. Fadi had gone out and slept in his car on the street on Christmas Eve.
Oh, my God. At Christmas. Jesus, that would be freezing.
But also, too, like, who the fuck goes, fuck you, and goes and has a fight and sleeps in his car? Or maybe, who knows?
Surely he
how
would have
this
had a
went.
credit card. He could have gone to a
Fucking hotel.
or another wing of the house.
Yeah. So, according to the Daily Mail, George had been trying to break up with this guy for 18 months, but he always took him back because he was a total softie. But they'd had a fight. George slept inside the house. Fadi was fucking shivering in that car, I bet. Around 2 p.m. the next day, Fadi went into the house and found George dead in his bed at home in his house in Goring-on-Thames. And he was 53. That's it. Gone too soon. And foul play was quickly ruled out.
Was it?
Yeah. In 2017, a coroner's report finally concluded that his death was due to natural causes and that he died of an enlarged heart and a fatty liver. And he's buried at Highgate Cemetery in North London with his mother's grave on one side.
Yes.
And his sister Melanie's grave on the other side, who I told you also died on Christmas Day 3 years later.
Oh, that's terrible.
And look, before I wrap up this black little Christmas present, I just briefly want to talk about George Michael's philanthropy, because he was basically like a real-life Secret Santa. So obviously we all know he did Band-Aid. I told you before he donated all the royalties from Last Christmas to Band-Aid. He did that single Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me, which he sang with Elton. And that all went to like different charities for children and AIDS education. He was a patron of the Elton John AIDS Foundation. He did loads of charity fundraisers, and that was just the stuff he did publicly. But after he died, quite a lot of charities spoke out to the media to say that George had privately been supporting them for years, including Childline, to which he donated millions and millions.
Oh, my God.
He also anonymously supported the Terence Higgins Trust and Macmillan Cancer Support, but he also, Geordie, gave money to normal people. So one day he was watching telly, he was watching Deal or No Deal, and he rang the production company of the quiz show because there was a contestant who said she needed £15,000 for IVF. Yeah. And he just sent her the money.
Oh, my God. Imagine having that gifted to you by George Michael.
Yep. And she never knew who it was from. But the production company knew. He just wanted to be anonymous.
Oh.
She must know now after he's died.
Yeah. The baby that George Michael bought for me.
No.
For Christmas.
Last Christmas, I gave you a baby. He was talking to a barmaid who turns out she was a student nurse. She needed $5,000 for her student debt. He just gave her a tip, $5,000.
Oh.
You know, he's amazing. Then there was another woman who was on this morning talking to Holly.
It's a good job he watches all these daytime TV shows, isn't it?
Oh, look, I mean, God knows. You know, he loved his spliff. So he's probably just woke up and, you know, like wake and bake. And there was another IVF woman who said she needed, you know, money to pay for her IVF, and he donated it.
Isn't he amazing? What a great guy.
Is.
R.I.P. George Michael.
I know. And in Highgate, this is another Christmas thing.
Yeah.
For absolute decades, he anonymously paid for a massive tree to be erected and decorated, and all these fundraising fairs. I mean, he was giving money, and it was all from an anonymous local resident. So I just think he was a beautiful man with a beautiful heart and the best hair in the business, who died because his heart was too big.
Oh, because his heart was too big. Exactly.
R.I.P. Yog.
Oh, Yog.
Gone too soon.
Gone too soon. Wowee. Thank you, Michelle. Michelle, I'm sorry, but the last half of that story, I found it hard to focus because suddenly I realised that you really look like Steven Tyler right now in that outfit.
I've got my ski headband on.
The long hair at the bottom, the buff hair at the top, and the big thing wrapped around them.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible.
Thank you so much for that gorgeous story in memoriam of a wonderful human being and a talent beyond all talents, George Michael. I just wanted to say, I know it was a little sad, but hey, Christmas doesn't have to all be ho, 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 does it? And that reminds me, after last week's episode where I spoke about the tsunami, I went ahead and watched the docuseries that I mentioned, Tsunami Race Against Time. It's a 4-parter, and I haven't finished quite yet because there was a lot of tears on my part. I'm sorry. It is hard to watch. But it's something that I felt I didn't address in my story last week, and I feel a bit ashamed about it, is stories from the local people who were affected, and that was very much highlighted in this docuseries. And I urge people, tomorrow Boxing Day is the 20th anniversary of the Indian Ocean / Boxing Day tsunami, so go ahead and watch that, because it is telling true stories of people who, not just the tourists, in fact they are the minority that are talking on this docuseries, everyday people who live in a place that isn't really affected. The Indian Ocean never has really been affected by tsunamis, Michelle.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd watched this docuseries before I did the episode, but hey ho, never mind, it's done now. The Pacific Warning Center for tsunamis was set up for the Pacific Ocean, not for the Indian Ocean.
Right.
And when they noticed this underground earthquake of a 9.1 magnitude, which, Michelle, every half a magnitude counts. It's like more and more bombs going off. They said if it had been a 10, it would have shorn the earth in half.
What?
It was that big. It was like broken.
Oh, my God.
It's that massive. And no wonder 4 or 5 countries and loads of islands were affected so devastatingly. There's 2 waves just going in opposite directions.
Wow.
That's why Africa was hit on one side, Asia was hit on the other, Thailand, etc. It was wild.
Well, I will link that up on the Patreon. I mean, you know, depending on like how full of Christmas food you are, and if you
maybe it's not one for the day.
If you're in for a heavy watch.
Just at some point, I think it's good to, I know it's stressful and it's sad and it's awful, but it happened and it's important to be aware. And more than anything, it's the human spirit, Michelle.
Yes.
How people wanted to help, how they did help. It's astounding. A lot of the stories, as sad as they are also quite hopeful and incredible.
It's tales of kindness and generosity and people helping people.
A bit like your George Michael story. He's one that helped people as well. And what a great guy.
I love that he just didn't want any recognition for his philanthropy.
Yeah, that's special.
I think he's a great guy, and the music was a wonderful trip down memory lane.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. And I hope everybody else did as well. And that you're got your feet up and you're with loved ones. Or if not, then you're doing exactly what you want to do all on your own. And there's no shame in that. You can have a Thai curry if you want to on Christmas Day and not see anybody. I know some people who have that planned and they're really looking forward to it. But whoever you are and wherever you are and whatever you do,
just keep
eavesdropping.
Eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, dropping, eavesdropping, eavesdropping, dropping, dropping.